Single dad helped her on Christmas morning, only to learn a life-changing truth. The cold wind cut across the quiet street that Christmas morning as if the world itself had paused to breathe. Snow lay untouched on the sidewalks, sparkling like crushed diamonds under the pale dawn. And in the stillness of that frozen morning, a woman named Emily Hart stood beside her stalled car with shaking hands, staring at the smoke rising from the engine as if her entire life had finally cracked open. She whispered to herself that she couldn't afford another setback, not today, not on the one day she had hoped would feel different, the one day she promised herself she wouldn't cry again. But life had a way of twisting the knife when someone was already on their knees. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the importance of good people helping others when least expected, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, her breath fogging in the frigid morning air. She had left her small apartment before sunrise, desperate to make it across town to deliver the only gift she had bought that year, a simple snow globe for her estranged mother whom she had not spoken to in 5 long years. Somehow, the universe had chosen today of all days to remind her that nothing in her life ever went smoothly. She felt the familiar heaviness inside her chest, that sinking feeling of always being one step away from falling apart. Her job was barely enough to cover rent. Her family was fractured. Her relationships were a string of disappointments. And now her car, her one lifeline to the world outside her loneliness, had died right in the middle of an empty road. Then, out of the quiet, she heard the faint crunch of footsteps approaching through the snow. When she looked up, she saw a man wearing a gray jacket, a beanie pulled low over his ears, and gloves that looked worn from long shifts. He was carrying a small toolbox, moving with the calm, steady stride of someone used to emergencies. Behind him, a small boy no older than 8 trailed along, bundled in a puffy winter coat and dragging a red sled behind him. The man introduced himself as Michael Turner, his voice gentle but confident. He explained he was a single father taking his son, Ethan, to the hill nearby for an early morning sled run before visiting Michael's mother. Emily felt embarrassed that she had ruined their morning, but Michael waved off her apologies with the kind of patience that didn't seem to be common anymore. He lifted the hood of her car without hesitation, even as snowflakes began to stick to his eyelashes. Emily watched him work, noticing how he handled even the rusted parts with care, as if he respected the machine despite its age. His son sat on the sled nearby, drawing pictures in the snow and occasionally glancing up at Emily with shy curiosity. The scene felt surreal to her, this man, this total stranger, helping her on a day when everyone else was wrapped in their own celebrations. There was something steady and grounding about him, something warm beneath the winter chill. As Michael continued inspecting the engine, Emily's mind drifted toward her own aching truth: she had no one waiting for her today. No family to return to. No friends checking up on her. Christmas was just a reminder of everything she had lost and everything she had never been able to rebuild. She pretended to distract herself with her phone, but really she was trying to hide the tears forming in her eyes. Michael eventually stood up and wiped his hands on a cloth from his toolbox. He explained that her alternator had likely died and her battery was now too weak to get the car running again. Emily's heart dropped. There was no way she could afford a repair, not today, and not anytime soon. She stepped back, overwhelmed. Sensing her panic, Michael offered to tow her car with a rope he kept in his truck. He would bring it to a local shop, one where the owner owed him a favor. Emily tried to protest, insisting he shouldn't interrupt his Christmas morning for a stranger, but Michael shook his head firmly. He told her that kindness meant little if people waited for convenience to offer it. And so, despite the chill in the air and the uncertainty in her chest, Emily agreed to follow him. They reached the shop, and Michael spoke with the owner while Emily stood beside Ethan, who told her about his school projects and how he wished his dad didn't work so many shifts. Emily saw the way the boy adored his father, how Michael's sacrifices were quietly shaping the child into someone gentle and good. When the shop owner finally returned with an estimate, one far lower than Emily expected, she felt her breath catch. It was still more than she could afford, but Michael stepped in, offering to cover the cost without hesitation. Emily immediately refused, but the man looked at her with the kind of sincerity that made her stop arguing. He said no one deserved to feel abandoned on Christmas. She didn't know how to respond to that. Kindness had become so foreign in her life that she barely recognized it. He offered her a ride home, but Emily admitted she wasn't heading home. She told him about the snow globe wrapped inside her coat pocket, about the mother she hadn't seen in years, and about how today was supposed to be a step toward forgiveness. Michael didn't ask for the details. He simply nodded, as if the pain in her voice alone was enough to understand. He told her he and Ethan would drive her wherever she needed to go. As they drove across town, Emily stared out the window at the glow of Christmas lights hanging across porches and windows. Every house looked warm, filled with laughter, families, and memories she no longer knew how to make. She closed her eyes, wondering whether she was making a mistake revisiting the past, whether her mother would even open the door. But Michael reminded her quietly that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the softest places. When they reached the small blue house on the corner, Emily felt her legs tremble as she stepped out of the truck. She asked Michael to wait in the car, but he stepped out too, telling her she didn't have to face her fears alone. Standing at the door with the snow globe clutched to her chest, Emily knocked with a shaking hand. The seconds felt like hours before the door finally opened and her mother appeared, older than Emily remembered, her eyes widening in shock. Emily tried to speak, but her voice broke. Michael stood a few steps behind her, not intruding, just grounding her presence with his quiet support. Emily's mother finally stepped forward, touching her daughter's face as if confirming she was real. Tears flowed. Words tumbled out, apologies, regrets, fragments of years lost. They held each other on the porch as snow drifted around them, mother and daughter finally breaking the wall that had kept them apart. Michael gently guided Ethan back into the truck to give them privacy, but when Emily invited him inside a little while later, he hesitated until her mother insisted. Inside, Emily watched Michael interact with her mother politely, and she noticed something soften in the older woman's eyes. Ethan sat beside her mother's small Christmas tree, mesmerized by the lights, while Michael quietly checked the window draft, the old heater, and even a loose cabinet hinge as though he couldn't help fixing things wherever he went. It was then Emily began sensing something deeper, something she couldn't yet explain. As the morning slowly unfolded into afternoon, Emily shared stories with her mother, and Michael listened politely while keeping Ethan entertained. Eventually, when they were preparing to leave, Emily walked them out to thank Michael again. But before she could speak, her mother followed them outside with a hesitant expression, holding something small in her hands, a faded photograph. Emily's breath froze when she saw it. It was a picture of her mother from decades ago, standing beside a man Emily never knew, holding a baby that looked like her. Her mother's voice shook as she explained that the man in the photo wasn't Emily's father, as she had always believed. He was someone her mother had loved deeply but lost long before Emily was old enough to understand. And that man had a brother. A brother who had a son. A son named Michael Turner. Emily stared at the photograph, her heart pounding as the truth unfolded like a revelation she never expected. Michael was connected to her family in a way none of them could have known. He was the nephew of the man her mother once loved, making him the only living link to a past Emily had never been allowed to explore. Emily's mother confessed she had spent years regretting the secrets she kept, the choices she made, and the walls she built. Christmas, she said, had always been the hardest because it reminded her of everything she had lost, including the family she once dreamed of having. The weight of the truth settled between them like the falling snow, soft, unexpected, and profoundly life-changing. Michael was stunned, not knowing how to respond, but Emily smiled through her tears, realizing that he hadn't just been a stranger who helped her that morning. He had unknowingly carried a piece of her history with him all along. Destiny had placed him in her path at the exact moment she needed someone the most. Emily hugged Michael with gratitude that words couldn't carry. Her mother hugged Ethan,